So my name is Alan Hamlet. A few of us are going to share some early work experience and some of the lessons that we learned. Um, so when I had some initial jobs that were just on weekend days when I was in high school. So I worked at a local cider mill and I had a paper route on Sunday morning with a good friend of mine. And so I had a little work experience. But when I graduated from high school, the deal with my parents and grandparents who were helping me with college fees was I would work every summer and pay for books and sundry items, maybe some of the living expenses and so forth. So I was expected to get a job after I graduated from high school in that summer before college. So first off, I had no idea how to go to look for a job, but there were some newspaper ads and stuff, and so I applied to Woodward and Lothrop, which is now a defunct department store, to work on the loading dock. So I didn't really know that much about what loading docks do, but the basic idea, so I got the job. They wanted a permanent employee, and I was open that I was going to leave when I was going to college. But apparently they liked me because they gave me the job anyway, even knowing I was going to go. All right, so loading dock. The basic idea is there's this big room and the semi truck backs up to a door to the outside. They open the door and then you just walk into the truck. So it's very easy to unload. All of the stuff from a department store. So Woody's was like a kind of a big department store that would be at the ends of a mall like Sears or whatever, right? So all the stuff coming into a loading dock comes in these things which are called spivies. Who's heard of a spivey? Nobody, me neither. Okay, it's kind of like a little thing on wheels that's fully enclosed, but it has a little curtain that opens up so you can lean in and look what's in there. So all the stuff for the department store comes in these spivies, and the people on the loading dock, their job is to roll the spivies out of the truck, and they're all lashed onto the side of the truck, so that's some work. And then there's a manifest inside the spivey that says what's supposed to be in there, and you have to check every single thing off, and then ultimately you find out what department it's supposed to go to, and then you have to go out on the store floor as innocuously as possible so as not to disturb any shoppers and put the stuff out where it's supposed to go. Okay, so this was fairly straightforward, and I learned this job pretty quickly, obviously, and there's a lot of tedium in terms of checking these things off the manifests, right? This is not fun, but easy to do in one way. All right, so the thing I learned about working there really was kind of in the general nature of capitalism departments. So when you go into one of these fancy department stores, what you see is all flash. It is, so you see these beautiful surfaces and everything is really well lit and everything, it looks nice. Okay, that's all made of ticky-tacky. And you go through the door into the back where the offices are, it's dark. First off, there's no light except maybe on a desk or two. It's all raw 2x4s holding up this edifice that the customers see. The managers of these departments were these harried people who worked on commission. Basically, what their department sold determined their salaries. They were very crabby people and lived in a really horrible work environment. I mean, dark, ugly. And so the clear message from the company is, what the cattle see that brings in money is our primary concern, and we could care less what you have to suffer through. If you don't sell, you don't make any money, and the place that you live is really horrible. So the loading dock was a more honest place. It was a utilitarian place, and it looked like a utilitarian place, and I didn't feel like I was being abused in any way. But they didn't pay me 50 cents an hour, but they paid, it was $2.75 an hour, I think, which I guess in 1977 wasn't so horrible for a college student. Anyway, so Woody's is gone now, but you know, I think the same kind of work issues are present in most department stores. Thanks.
First jobs and worst jobs. I've had many, and this one stands out as something that I remember. This story is going to cover nepotism, good and bad parts of it, and a little bit about keeping your word. I was much younger. I just become a teenager. My mother had died a couple of years earlier. My dad was trying to take care of 2 kids and run a business. To make things work out after school, my bus would come by, drop me off at the business that my dad was trying to run. And that way he didn't have to worry about me being at home from 3 o'clock until 6 or 7 when he stopped working. To keep me from being in the way, I got to extend my household chores to work. I got to mow the grass, I got to clean the bathroom, I got to dig chips out of the machines, and then use the forklift to take the chips out and dump them in the hopper. I learned lots of cool things like how to weld, how to use acetylene torches. I got paid half of minimum wage, and none of that felt like a job until one day they were trying to make things go a little quicker for the guys who actually were making most of the money for the company. They wanted to get one of the workers no longer needed to do something, and they thought, well, this young kid can do this. My dad said, so he showed me how to do it, and this was simply taking a cast iron end cap that went on an air compressor, and they look a little like a bowler cap. They weigh about 10 pounds, and they're rough castings. When they arrived in the business, they had to be painted so that they wouldn't rust. So when they first came in, we had skids of them. They were on nearly 30 or 40 per skid. They're stacked up all along one side of the building. And instead of having one of the higher paid gentlemen sit with a brush and paint very smelly oil-based paint into the inside of each one of these cabs, I got a smock and I got shown how to do it. And I was told I would get paid 25 cents a piece, which was, for me, looking to try to buy a motor for my go-kart. I added up very quickly how many caps it would take for me to get that motor. And I looked at that wall of parts and I said, okay, it's going to take me about 2/3 of that wall and I'll have my motor. Well, the first day I worked 2 hours. I got about 6 pieces done an hour. I knew I could get up to maybe 10. And then I looked at that wall of parts and I thought, that's going to be quite a while. So having mowed the grass outside and had to move things out of the way, I noticed that there was a gutter laying on the side of the building that might work really nicely to keep that oil-based paint from dripping on the floor so I wouldn't have to clean it up. And if I put it just right, it would drain downhill into a paint can where I could then use it again so I wouldn't waste paint, because it got yelled at for wasting paint already a couple of times. I put a couple of boards up and started figuring out that after another day of making parts very slowly, that I could just pour the paint into this cup-like part, move it around, and I could cover the inside very well, and then pour it into the next cup, wait for it to drip, and set it down on the boards to drain into the trough. At which point, I was doing about one of these caps every minute. And suddenly, the fellow who taught me how to do it, he came over because he saw that I was getting a lot done, and I'd asked him a couple times to shift some of the skids with the forklift. And he looked at the work very well, and he says, "You're not missing any spots." And he said, "This is working really good." He gave me some really good feedback. So I was excited. So I knocked through a bunch of the stuff, and my engine looked like it was going to happen. So after a couple of days, I'd gotten enough of these done that they had a bank of parts. And I went over to my dad and I said, "All right, I got the stuff done. Let's talk about money. I'm gonna get this payola." And like I said, I was making about half of minimum wage. The guys running the lathes were making 2 times minimum wage. And with what I had just done, I would have been making, instead of my $1.50, I would have been making almost $15 an hour. And my dad came out, took a look at it, looked at the stuff, talked to the fellow who taught me how to paint it. His name was Bob Holland. Bob commended me on what I had done. And my dad, this is the bad side about nepotism, said, "That's a lot of money. Tell you what, I'll pay you a nickel a piece." Now, 13 years old, I didn't know how to deal with this very well. So I kind of just shrugged and said, "Okay." And he paid me the money, and it has never left my memory. And from that day forward, I said, I'm not going to work someplace that they don't pay me for ingenuity. And so this story is about keeping your word, the good and bad parts about nepotism. I had a job, and it taught me a lot of skills, and I got someplace. But my first actual job, making piecework, painting the inside of parts, told me exactly what I did not want to do the rest of my life. I got a 5-horse Tecumseh. It was a right-hand drive, and it fit perfectly on the back of my go-kart. And I drove that for several years and enjoyed it every time. So.